everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. We'll give a couple minutes for people to join us. But in the meantime, I'm going to go put a link in the chat box. If you could sign in, that would be super appreciated. So just put in your name if you're here into the sign-in sheet. That would be great. And we'll just give a couple more minutes for people to join us. And apologies for changing the meeting link. We're just making sure that we have interpretation this morning. So hopefully people can. And if you don't see your name, it should be a little bit in alphabetical order by first name. But if you don't see your name, please add it at the bottom. And please check if you're able to be here. And we'll just give a little bit more time for people to join, because I know that there was a little bit of a exciting thing this morning with changing Zoom links. So I want to make sure people have enough time to join. And also thanks to taking your time out of your schedule to join us this morning. Okay. Hopefully everybody's able to access the sign-in sheet. While we're waiting, if you could just make sure to check if you're here and to the attendance on the far right column, that would be really helpful. And I think we'll just give one or so more minutes to ask people to join us, because I know that there were some IT technical issues this morning related to our Zoom account. So I want to make sure that people have time. So yeah, I'll wait one or so more minutes. If you could just put your name, make sure that your name is there in the participant list. And if you don't see your name, please add it to the rows at the bottom. There should be a few empty rows just in case. We will go ahead and get started in a minute. And thanks for your time in joining us this morning, afternoon, wherever you are. Okay, so I think at this point we can go ahead and get started. Just as a reminder again, please do, as the day goes on or the morning goes on, please do put your name in the participant list so we can make sure to have kind of a record and know who joined us this morning. But with that, let's go ahead and get started. And I think I just wanted to welcome everyone for taking the time out of your day to join us this morning. Just kind of a quick housekeeping, if we could go to the next slide. If we could, a couple of housekeeping items. There should be interpretation here. We should have French interpretation, so you should be able to go to the interpretation at the globe at the very bottom. Please select, if you need interpretation, please select what language, English or French, that you would like to hear. So that's just a housekeeping item. Okay, so if we could go to the next slide. So what we what we want to discuss during our time together is really at our last TAC meeting, we focused on what we aim to do in year 2, basically our work plan. So what we want to do this time is kind of how are we doing on our work plan? What have we achieved in this first quarter? Then we'll go into Q&A, and then we'll really focus a little bit, ground ourselves on core competencies, a bit of background, and then a little bit of overview on the technical sectors. And then we really want your input, your thoughts, your help as we have a couple of guiding questions on this topic to think through our strategy, our challenges, our successes, and kind of where PWS should fit in this space moving forward. And then we'll close it with next steps and feedback. So that's kind of map the agenda of our next hour together. So we look forward to speaking with you and hopefully get a good kind of meeting out of this. So with that, let's go to the next agenda item. The next slide. Yeah, so just to ground ourselves, this is highlights of what we wanted and aim to do in year 2. So just to focus everybody again, the overall goal of ProWash and Scale is to basically strengthen the design, implementation, and effectiveness of our sector-specific activities across emergency risk reduction and resilience settings. And our technical areas that we focus on are water, sanitation, hygiene, integrated water resource management, ag, NRM, and markets and livelihoods. And how do we do that? We do that a couple ways. We do it through capacity strengthening, we do it through learning, we do it through knowledge sharing, and we do it through research. So that's just kind of a grounding of how we do this. So what specifically is our focus this year? Again, we're building on progress that we did last year, and we really want to emphasize here our local partners. And what we do that, we're doing that through a variety of activities. So we're emphasizing local partners in our research, which we'll hear a little bit more in the next couple of slides. We're also trying to look for local partners and kind of present out learnings that have happened and in conferences. And then we're also doing peer groups. So initially last year, as a reminder, we did 4 peer groups, one on water, sanitation, NRM, and climate. And that's something that we are continuing this year. And then we also are continuing on the one-on-one technical assistance, capacity building support. So then another key priority that we're going to be doing this year is our applied research. So to date, we have released 3 RFAs, 1 last year and 2 this year. We'll talk a little bit more on the 2 this year. And we really want to focus in this on year 2 in order to enable people to have enough time to both conduct the research and also disseminate it. So that's why we're really focusing on applied research this year. And then the last 2 are something that we, as ProWash and Scale, do regularly, but we just want to keep the focus on it. That's connecting stakeholders. So this would be our work with clusters. This would be our work with communities of practice and regional networks of learning, and also to make sure that we learn and adapt as we go. So that's something that we're really trying to figure out this year. So this is our highlights in year 2. So the next slide should help us to see of how are we doing. So this is just not going to go through everything, but this is a high-level snapshot on specific programs, how we have provided support in the last quarter. So I'm not going to do each one, but just as a high level, we started a fundamental market systems development course. This is 6 learning sessions. It's for the RIFSA partners, and it will go through the beginning of June. We also held a market-based sanitation strategy for the Al Barka RIFSA in Mali, and we continue to provide tailored support to partners across a variety of topics. Here we've listed on Make Me a Change Agent. We've listed on seed system security assessments. We also have provided TAs to the new DRC RIFSAs reviewing scopes of work. And we've also supported a number of partners on technical topics. We've just listed here is the Haiti RIFSA on agriculture and natural resources management teams. And recently, hopefully people have been able to see it, we launched a guide to resources on emergency drinking water quality. So we hope that that's something that is useful and as you move forward. So then that's kind of one bucket, is the capacity strengthening. Another bucket, if we just move down here, is the research and learning. So as we mentioned, this year we've launched 2 RFAs. The first one is centering community voices and so this is specifically designed for local partners. Again, as I mentioned, we're trying to include local partners wherever we can across our activities. And then the second one is on climate resilience in emergency settings. For the second one, just as a note, the deadline for applications is coming up. So please, if you're interested or it's relevant, please feel free to look at this in our website. The second and third is just an example of how another type of research and learning support that we're providing. So one is to make sure that we're documenting lessons learned across the program activities, but this is particularly to RIFSAs before they close out on specific topics. And we're also supporting some of the Madagascar and Uganda RIFSA on looking at barriers and enablers to WASH behavior. So then if we go to our kind of third bucket, right, we have the capacity strengthening, the research and learning, and the peer learning and knowledge sharing. Thanks. You can just, we've done the peer learning groups and this local consultants group, which is focused on network and learning. Okay, now you can do next slide, sorry. Okay, so this is just an example of support that we're providing to the clusters and emergency working groups across the quarter. I'm not, again, every single thing on here, but just kind of wanted to flag again, you can think similarly to the program, you can think these in buckets: the capacity strengthening, the research and learning, and the peer learning and knowledge sharing. So just as the capacity strengthening, we're really looking across the cluster, particularly the Global WASH cluster and technical working groups, looking at activities on capacity strengthening and knowledge management. And then, sorry, and then in terms of our research and learning, we're providing input to a lot of the markets and crisis learning agenda. And we're also looking at kind of scoping activities. And then if you go to the peer learning and knowledge sharing, kind of the one on the bottom right, we supported a half-day in-person workshop in the Central African Republic on seed system security assessment findings, recommendations, and sector coordination. We will be having a larger webinar on this coming up. So if you're interested, please check our website and we can put it in the chat box for if you wanted to register. We're also coordinating with the Hygiene Promotion in Emergencies Technical Working Group on quarterly webinars. So we had one in January and we recently had another one. So that's just kind of an overview of what kind of support we have provided in the last quarter. We look to continue providing similar support moving forward. Then if we go to our next slide, this is just to give us a sense of the geography and where we are providing support. And this is specifically for our RIFSA partners, just to give you a sense of where the partners are located and the partners that we're providing support to. So we don't need to spend too much time on that, but just to give you a sense of the geography here. And then if you go to our next slide, we can think through of what are we doing, what's upcoming. This is not exhaustive. This is just a few of them. And so one of them is we're going to launch this PermaGarden online learning cohort. We hope that we've had a lot of interest in this. We anticipate that there will be 4 cohorts, including one Francophone cohort. And then as mentioned, we have the Market Systems Development Foundational cohort, and we anticipate that ending in early June. And we're really looking forward. We've had a lot of interest on MSD, and after this ends, we're kind of going to look at how we continue this momentum and interest moving forward. Then we also have travel funds. So again, we're trying to make sure that we target local partners here. And so hopefully in the last Pro Wash and Scale newsletter, we launched a call, an expression of interest for local partners on resilience design. So if that's something that is interesting, please do contact us. Then we also have WASH conference. So if it's a BHA funded activity, you've been accepted and you need travel support, please do contact us. Then the last two are the Global WASH Partners meeting and the upcoming Emergency Environmental Health Forum, where we will participate and hopefully link with programs there. And also during this next quarter, we're going to start really working on this case studies on emergency drinking water. So with that, that's kind of a snapshot of where we've been and where we aim to go. So I think I'll just leave it up to if there's any questions, comments, or answers. We'll just give a couple minutes for questions or thoughts on our activities or ways you can be involved. So please feel free to reach out if there's any questions or comments.
Hey, Julia, this is Precious.
Oh, yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I was trying to figure out the raise hand thing. I can't find it.
That's fine.
But, yeah, thank you so much for just a great presentation and what PWS is doing so far. I just want to make sure that we can clarify on, because I know you've talked a lot about the emergency activities as well as making sure that we understand about RIFSUS and support to RIFSUS. But can you clarify how support is provided to the emergency partners in some way so that we can understand that?
Yeah, thanks, Precious. And actually, hopefully I'm not on mute. This morning there was IT issues. Anyway, okay, I think you can hear me. So in general, for the emergency partners, what we found is it's really helpful to go at a global level. So we work a lot of the times with the clusters, the technical working groups. So that would be, for example, the Global WASH clusters. This would also be the Ag and Food Security cluster. And then instead of necessarily supporting an individual activity. So for the emergencies, a lot of our work is done through the clusters and the technical working groups, and we kind of link with them on needs and kind of webinars moving forward. So I don't know if that helps, if that answers your question, Precious, but I would just say that.
Yes, no, yes, it does. I just wanted us to kind of distinguish it and understand the difference with the RIFSUS support and the emergency support.
Yeah. So the RIFSUS support, we do a lot of the direct programs, and we do, for the emergency, we do a lot of we work through the clusters in general. So any other questions before we kind of go into our next segment? And if you have questions or comments, just feel free to come off mute or just enter in the chat box, either way. Okay, I'm not hearing questions, but we can always come back to this. If there's any individual questions, we can always come back later to what we're doing. And we will be sharing these slides out so people can see as well. Okay, so if we go to our next section, this is kind of the meat of today's topic and where we're kind of hoping that we can discuss as a group on core competencies. So if we go to our next slide, just kind of want to think of background and why this is something that we're looking at. So we know that in a lot of our programs, we have specific challenges related to human resources and staffing and constraints. So of course, challenges, especially in some of these, is timing. So, when programs end, what happens with staffing, and also some of these programs are very quick. And so you have a lot of turnover and kind of staff change related to timing of programs and timing of emergencies. The other kind of challenge that we have or that has been expressed is what is in terms of technical expertise. So what is required to be an expert in each particular sector? What kind of expertise or knowledge do you need to have? And then in addition to that, it's even more complicated because it's not just you need to be an expert, say, in markets or in agriculture. You also need to have some kind of cross-cutting skills. So what do we mean by this? You know, you need to know, you have to work with gender, you have to work on youth. It's also, you have to work with communities, engagement. So you have to be able to communicate very effectively. You need to know something about M&E. So it's really defining what's essential is not just your sector-specific expertise, but there's a lot of cross-cutting skills that we need to think about when we think about requirements and what makes an effective person with these skills. So the goal is to kind of, in collaboration with other partners, to develop and refine standard competencies in each of these sectors. And why do we want to do that? So we want to increase professionalization. We want to improve professional development, right? So you have you know your track of where you're going to be, and you know what's required in order to go up, basically. And we want to improve our expertise in these technical areas. So that is basically includes three components of this. So we need to assess, right? We need to know what is common and what is required as your roles and responsibilities. Also, like, what are standard job descriptions? What are we looking for when we do this? And then we need to know hiring. So, you know, that's kind of your overall capacity of assessment. Then, as part of this, we need to improve and develop. So this is your develop component here. So that's your strengthening your capacity. That's improving your performance. So you can just improve your professional development here. And then the third, and I apologize if you can hear background, the third is evaluate, right? So how are you doing? Yeah, that's a good question. How are you doing? What does this look like? This is your performance management. This is your supervision. So this is just a general thing of what we're looking at in terms of why core competencies. So I think what would be helpful is we look at this into our sector. So what exactly are we meaning in our sector? I think the next one is looking at WASH. Yeah.
So essentially this, I can take over from here. My name is Nicole. If I haven't met everyone, I'm the WASH technical director for the project. So for the core competencies in WASH, essentially the WASH roadmap, which is a collective of humanitarian organizations, have defined developing and testing a core competency framework for humanitarian WASH as a priority. And I just dropped into the chat box a link to the WASH roadmap because if you're not familiar, you might be interested in checking out the different work streams that the roadmap has collectively decided to prioritize. So as a first step with the working group, which is comprised of a number of humanitarian organizations, we're looking at what exists. So what core competencies already exist? What are organizations using to benchmark, to, as Julia mentioned, assess, support professional development and evaluate performance? So we've seen that there are a number of frameworks that are available, some that are more broad to humanitarian work, not specific to WASH. So that would be the core humanitarian competencies. And then also some of the specific organizations such as Oxfam, IFRC, and Save the Children, BioForce have some core competencies that are specific to WASH. However, there seems to be a difference between larger, well-established organizations and maybe ones that are newer to WASH or newer to the humanitarian space. And REDR, which is an organization in the UK that supports a lot of training, did a survey last year as part of a feasibility study, which indicated a desire for a sector-wide WASH competency framework, especially among individual practitioners. They had 113 respondents, and 82% of them stated that they would highly value or somewhat value a WASH sector competency framework. So how are we starting to address this gap? Well, with the roadmap, with the emergency partners, we are supporting a core competency task force. So the first step has started, and what we're essentially doing is looking at what's out there and mapping across organizations what competencies are found in multiple frameworks, in job descriptions, and using the SPHERE standards as a way to organize that information. So thinking about, in order to meet the SPHERE standards around water supply and quantity and quality, what skills and competencies are needed in order to meet the hygiene promotion, fecal sludge management, waste management, etc. So if you're familiar with the SPHERE standard, that's sort of the backbone to thinking about the core competencies. And then we've also been brainstorming with the group members about what additional competencies are needed that are not already included in the SPHERE standard. And some of them that are coming to mind are around climate and adapting to climate change, as well as around data literacy, including understanding information that's generated by AI and how you would use data management tools, as well as new and emerging technologies. So that's on the humanitarian side. And so today we're curious to get your input on the core competencies, as well as if this might be something that would be relevant for development actors as well. I'll turn it over to Jen to talk more about the ag and markets.
Thanks, Nicole. So on the sort of food security and then like maybe specifically market systems development, those are the best examples of core competency work that's been done in the space that were kind of worth highlighting here. Different from Nicole's presentation, in terms of the clusters, the core competency piece is not necessarily specifically flagged as a high priority. However, work has been done in this area. And I've listed a few examples there for people to check out if you haven't seen them before or noticed them before. I'm dropping the links in the chat. Under the predecessor award, which was TOPS, there was a core competency series that includes like a booklet and a self-assessment toolkit. And that's very much focused on ag and natural resource management. It's got resources around ag program manager positions, but it also includes things like commodity management and gender and knowledge management, M&E. So it's a useful tool, but again, it was developed in 2017. Then on the MSD side, there's also Beam Exchange has a full toolkit around an MSD competency framework, which is really a catalog of the full range of knowledge, skills, and aptitudes that are affiliated with high-performing teams that use market systems approach. So it's really useful for practitioners in identifying personal training needs and continuing their professional development. It's useful for trainers to diversify the courses that are offered within programs, or refining training programs for like training programs within projects. Excuse me. And then managers as well, to help strengthen recruitment and the sort of onboarding process for MSD staff. And then there's one that's a little bit more broad. That's the core humanitarian competency framework that touches across like sectors and is really focused on supporting the adoption of the core humanitarian standards related to accountability and emergency response. But it's also a very comprehensive guide for humanitarian practitioners in general. So I wanted to include that as well. So as I said, this isn't necessarily an area that's been flagged as a priority by clusters in their work plans, but it's always worth kind of touching on this, because we know, especially for certain sectors, that sometimes there are issues around not just recruitment of the right people, but planning for their training and ongoing capacity strengthening, and also retention of staff once they're trained. So maybe some of the current issues or gaps that we might want to explore during the breakout would be around, is the need to update some of these resources in a similar way to what Nicole described on the WASH side. What's the level of awareness of some of these frameworks? Are people using them, or is there uncertainty about the best ways to adopt them? And maybe is there a need for a balance between sort of like the practical tools that are included in things like the MSD competency framework versus more general standards like in the core humanitarian competency framework. So these are just some, like a quick overview of what we're seeing in these sectors, and we can dig in more on the breakout groups. And so maybe just to introduce, yeah, I think we can move to introducing the breakout groups. Is that okay? Next slide. So that's what we're going to do now. And just to kind of tee it up for us so people know what's happening, we're going to have people self-select into their breakout room of choice. If you want to stay and talk about these core competencies within sort of food security and maybe market systems development, you can stay here in the main room. And then if you would rather talk about the WASH core competency work, that will be breakout room 1. And in each breakout room, we're going to kind of circle around 3 main questions. How do we see core competencies, and how, what do we use currently? What do we do instead if we're not using some of these tools that have been highlighted? And then think through like what comes next, as Julia was highlighting, and we can dig into those with the questions 2 and 3. So I think if we can drop the link to people should have the sign-in sheet link, but let's drop it one more time. And if you scroll down to starting page 8, there are some spaces there for us to work on in our groups to answer some of these questions. Bella, should we go into our groups? Great, so the groups have been launched, I believe.
They should be, and if you can just choose which one you want to do, or we can assign.
Yeah, if you don't want to join the WASH group, you just stay in this room. So that one's easy. And then if you want to join WASH, you need to choose room 1, I believe.
Yep.
Cool. And we'll just give everybody a few minutes to, let's see, I think.
Yeah, it looks like people are joining. So let's give a couple
Yeah.
minutes, Jen. And then there should be in the chat the link to the Google Docs.
Yes.
Where we're going to be taking notes.
And we're here in the main room, so our little notes section starts on page 8 of that document. And you'll see like a heading that says food security and markets. I think we might be pretty well established in our groups, yeah?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
Looks
cool.
like
Should we
it.
go to gallery view so it's not just me?
I know.
Hi, everyone.
Let's
Hi,
see.
everyone. Thanks for sticking around to talk about the food security and markets sort of core competencies. But we can go beyond these topics, obviously, but those were the main examples that we found were kind of most current, most recent, and maybe most useful. Should we, at any time, guys, what you can do in this discussion is either come off mute and share, or if you're not comfortable with that, you can go straight into this notes document and add your thoughts. Whatever you prefer is totally fine. And we're going to just start off with this question of how do each of you use core competencies, or do you? Like, for instance, might you use them to identify training needs? Do you use them to help you with your hiring or recruitment, ongoing coaching? And if you do use them, it would be great to hear about which documents or frameworks you use the most. Maybe just a quick reaction. Are folks using core competency type resources? Even a show of hands, although I know it's hard to find reactions on Zoom sometimes.
I know. Oh yeah, here we go. I see.
Marcia?
Maybe.
Marcia, you're using them?
Yeah, sorry, it's Marcia.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. I don't know if we have, if I can think of a specific, like really systematic way that we've been using them. But I do think they're very helpful for drawing up job descriptions. I think we probably could be more thoughtful about using the core competency framework sort of more internally. I think a lot of time we apply them to partners as here's a partnership capacity strengthening plan, like what are our local partners maybe doing that we could work together to improve without maybe using to reflect on ourselves as much. And so I still very helpful, but definitely something that maybe we could do a little bit more internal work on as well.
And when you do use them, for example, for recruitment or for identifying needs of like your partners, which ones jump out? Which ones are you most often using? Or if there's a certain tool or resource or anything.
I don't know if that's for me specifically.
Yeah, sure.
I guess I'm sort of newer to Save the Children, so I'm a little bit less familiar with the Save the Children internal tools. But when I was previously with CRS, we had some more like CRS internal tools. So I guess I'd be referring back to those, but also like the Beam Exchange. Is also
One thought I had about the Beam Exchange in particular is I really appreciate how practical those tools are. And, you know, because sometimes I feel like I can get lost in sort of like a list of aspirational sort of core competencies or standards. And how do I translate that as a program manager or as even a staff member into like actionable kind of either a scope of work or a training plan so that's one thing I appreciated about Beam Exchange's resources. Are others using core competencies regularly in their work? And if not, what do you use instead to like help you with kind of recruitment or identifying training needs or sort of tracking team capacity or as Marcia said, like local partner capacity, that sort of thing? Are there alternatives that folks are using? This is a hot topic, everyone. So if I'm hearing, if there's sort of quiet, I'm wondering if this is a thing that folks are just not necessarily doing, or they're doing something different that's called something different or thought of in a different way than the term core competency. And that's okay too. We're just curious to see if there's like a need or a gap here. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Okay, well, feel free to interrupt me. I just feeling the quiet. But the next question might be interesting then for us is, you know, do we even think then, given that there hasn't necessarily been a lot of indication that folks are using a standard or established core competency resource, do people think that maybe updating or creating new core competencies for certain sectors or certain types of positions would be helpful at all? Julia?
So I just dropped something else. I was going to say that can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Sorry, I missed your message in the chat. My bad.
Yeah, so saying that not that people are using anything different, but that for me particularly, it's not something that is standardized. So you think about it, but you've not gone ahead to really say, okay, these are the competencies I've created what I need in my sector in terms of recruiting and in terms of capacity building, for example. It's something that you have of your head, and maybe you put them in job descriptions when you do them, and have some of those competencies in maybe some of your performance evaluations. Yeah, but not something that's, in my case, really thought about and standardized, that you say, okay, this is ABC that I'm looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair point. And I think probably a lot of folks do that, especially given like everything else we're doing. That it's, yeah. I feel like that's a common approach. Coach and mentors as applied. Sorry, Afia, what's GA approach? That's my bad.
It's the graduation approach.
Thank you. Oof,
Yeah. So
scary.
if we can get some guidance around
Okay.
coaches and mentors and what to look for, because now they do everything, following up with the households, mentoring, guiding them. Then in the space of, well, let's say in the ag, livelihoods, food security area, what exactly are you looking for when they are following up on everything? Who qualifies to be a coach or a mentor in this regard? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's one of the things that I found not frustrating, but sort of just difficult when it comes to core competencies. They are very specific to like a certain technical area or range of like sector. And yet we're always looking for kind of these unicorns, right? Who can do, like you said, Avia, like a little bit of everything. So then how do you establish core competencies for like finding this ultimate kind of person? But I think that's a really good point you raised. Thanks, I'm adding that to the notes.
Hi, I can also speak into something on that. This is Alyssa Shoemaker. I'm working with Christy on the USAID side
Nice.
of ProWash Scale. Yeah. And so I'm new on the team, so was wanting to listen in, but we've been having a conversation recently too about the balance between educational experience and practical experience.
Yeah.
And how do we kind of consider that balance? You know, what, not that one is given more weight than another, but I think that when it comes to, like, to your point, Jen, when it comes to thinking about people's experiences on some of those cross-cutting items that are still very important, many of those come from practical experience, or maybe from something that wouldn't fall within the hat of a traditional title for a core competency you'd be looking for in ag, for example. So there's a bit of, you know, how do you strike that balance? And then also, how does that influence the type of people that are able to be in roles in the sector, especially as it's important for us to be targeting folks who haven't had some of the same opportunities as others. So those are a bit of my thoughts there.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good point. Hang on. So with that in mind, I'm wondering, maybe we can just chat about, well, open to more thoughts on that. But this question of updating or creating new core competencies, perhaps looking at it from the point of view of how do we build a set of core competencies or guidelines or resources that help get at some of these questions of like the need for team members to have a full range or complement of skills. And then how do we strike that balance between sort of formal, either education or years of experience versus like the kinds of experience that provides those skills through learning by doing. Do folks think that that might be taking that sort of angle? Does that sound right? Does that sound useful or valuable to folks on this, in this group? And or our kind of final question is, oh, we always like to bring it home. How can ProWash and Scale best help in this area? You know, if we feel like there may be a need here, I think that's what we're getting at as well, is to understand whether this would be useful and valuable to you and get your sense of that. Any thoughts? Sure, go ahead. Sorry, I'm not seeing it. Oh, it's Afia again. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, hi Jen again. I'm also just observing the room and also thinking through in my head and asking if such a resource was available, will it be something that I really need if I'm thinking of skill and ProWash commitment, at least in this space, skill, committing time to that, will it be something that I really need? And how have we done this in the past? And I agree with the previous speakers on looking at previous job descriptions, looking at staff performance and going back to that to compare to previous job descriptions. Sometimes some of these resources just to align other organizations' job descriptions for similar role. These are all things we look at to pull together if we need one, or even to assess for partners that we work with. So now I'm asking myself, even if you were to go back and look at, for example, if we are trying to find someone that wears multiple hats when it comes to technical areas for a particular role, what do we look at? Experience versus education. And I'm still asking myself, will it not come back to that individual organization on where their priority areas are? Because sometimes you want to then prioritize, like maybe ag techniques and say elements around gender is an added value, be it educational experience, and we can find someone with a gender background to then support. But our key focus is you should have that ag experience. So does it not come back to the organization to decide which areas they then prioritize? And so is this guidance going to be more of when do you decide what to prioritize? And based on that, what do you then look for? So I'm still asking myself the question of, is this something that Scale should commit resources to and work on? And I don't know if those of us on this call is enough for us to come at a conclusion to that question, or if you probably need to send out a survey or find out a bit more to see if really your stakeholders are interested in this and find value in this before you commit time and resources to it. Thank you.
Okay, that's really helpful. I think we're getting close to time, Julia.
Yeah, I think we were initially thinking another 2 or 3 more minutes, but you know, if this is a good time to end, that's also fine. I just want to make sure that we have enough time. You know, people, if there's other thoughts or comments on this. Yeah, it seems like the WASH group wants another 5 minutes. So if there's any kind of other thing that we wanted to, other thoughts on something that PWS could do, or even more in general. Marcia, I see a comment on VSLAs. I'm not sure that Jen, did we talk about that one? This VSLA core competency? I wasn't sure, Marcia, if we wanted to just flag that.
Sorry, I didn't see it, Marcia. Let me look.
Oh, I think it's pretty related to Afia's comment about like core competencies for coaches and mentors in a graduation approach, or more like programmatic level rather than kind of broader like you were talking about. So I think your response to Afia's comment also covered the VSLA core competencies.
Mhm. Okay. Sorry, I'm taking notes and sort of catching myself
Yeah,
up
yes.
at the
No,
same
sorry.
time.
Sorry, Jen. I'm like, yeah, I'm also. Is there any other kind of thoughts on other things people think that PWS could do? Or maybe is this something that you would like to see broader input, like a survey or something like that on thoughts? I'm just trying to think for us next steps. Oops, I see more people audio situation. I'm not sure what happened there. Hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, just want to
Oh,
keep
yeah,
this
totally.
open. Okay. Always the struggle.
One thing that I've always been interested in this topic, well, it may be slightly off topic, but still important, is the idea of staff retention. So like the efforts that are made, you know, maybe whether you use core competency frameworks or not, but identifying like training needs and capacity strengthening needs to help meet some standards or be, you know, make sure you have the right people on board, and then staff turns over. And so I just, you know, tracing this through the logical kind of progression of career paths and that sort of thing, like what role might a core competency framework or other approach might have, might play in helping kind of the ultimate question of staff retention and consistency or continuity. Do people struggle with that piece or have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that is a great point. And a list of core competencies. I think the main thing, there's two questions. How do you first get into the space for those folks that are earlier on in their careers or interested in getting into this space but haven't yet? And then how do you progress? And I think having a roadmap about how to progress is really vital to staff retention. And if that roadmap is a list of competencies, you know, like here's the things that we want you to be focusing on learning and growing, trainings that you can take, etc. It really kind of creates, it materializes that way to move up in the organization and helps you see that it's attainable and that it's not just, you know, random. So I think that that is a really important thing to think about here.
Yep. And that was one thing in sort of like preparing for this discussion, I saw as like a key takeaway under the humanitarian, the core humanitarian capacity strengthening, core competency framework. That was one of the findings that they discovered when they were sort of doing the prep work for that framework, was that there was real lack of clarity on career path. Oh, Marcia, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I guess I was just going to say, kind of to Afia's point, that any core competencies would probably be tailored to each organization, because, you know, each organization would have different values or different, you know, strategy. So it might help provide kind of a roadmap for advancement within that organization. And, you know, even if different organizations tailored them slightly differently, maybe there would be some continuity. But just off the top of my head, it seems like it might be more within organization than across organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I think it's now just, I know that we kind of cut off at the very end. So just wanted to thank everybody for their time on this. I know it's 8:55. We have 5 more minutes. So I really do want to thank everybody for your input. We really appreciate it. What we're going to be doing after this meeting is we're going to be sharing slides from today, and we'll also kind of be sharing out the notes. So we really appreciate your input, and just as a kind of follow-up, we do have a Pro Wash and Scale newsletter. So if you're not already on that, that would be great if you could just sign in. I think we really had productive discussions within the wash and ag space. So I don't know, Jen or Nicole, if you just want to do one highlight from the group, or we could just launch just one highlight, and then we can launch the survey and sign off for the day.
Sure,
Yeah.
I'll go. Sorry, do you mind if I go? Because I have a call in a couple minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a really useful discussion, but I think one of the key takeaways, and folks can correct me if you disagree, is that these ideas are really also dependent on like work best when they're set within organizations. And a lot of organizations already have their own sort of core competency approaches and use things like past performance and past position descriptions to build the new ones. But that there was agreement that using core competencies is important to strike that balance between what we're looking for in terms of formal education, formal experience, and also kind of lived experience or on the job experience, that they can be helpful for that reason. And also to create more transparent, clear pathways on a career pathway that lets people know what they need to do to succeed and to progress in their careers. Go ahead, Nicole.
I think from our side was just that it's important to define for who is the audience for the core competencies, as well as considering the wide range of levels of staff that work within water and sanitation hygiene. And I think the second main point was really to consider cross-cutting competencies such as gender and social inclusion, ethics, cultural competency. So considering how that can also be built into the framework along with specific technical WASH competencies.
All right, thanks. And thanks everybody for participating. I think we're going to launch the end of the poll at the end. And so we just want to thank you for your time and input. I know that everybody has a lot to do today. And so we're really grateful that you took the time out of your schedule to join us. So with that, if you could please fill out the survey that should be showing up on your screen, that would be great. And thanks for your time.